Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel, where everything you are about to hear and see has been done in one take. I am your host, the One Take Man. This week's video is a follow-up on last week's video, the one I made on International Talk Like a Pirate Day, where I talked about some potential mechanical improvements that I would want to see show up in a new remake, or a potential new remake, of Sid Meier's Pirates. One of these mechanical suggestions would require a reworking of the story as well, and for that reason I decided to make this follow-up video, where using the 2004 remake of the original 1987 game, uh, how could I take that essential narrative premise and adapt it for a more modern audience? Before I delve into the actual meat of the video, it's helpful to recognize the base of the discussion. Namely, the central narrative premise of the '04 remake is that the player character's family, after becoming destitute, is abducted by the family's rival and main villain of the game, and the goal of the player character is to both rescue and avenge their family members. That is a strong enough premise in and of itself. However, it is one that I think could be improved in a variety of ways. The first improvement I want to make is that instead of all of the family members being older than the player character, it would perhaps be more impactful if instead all of the family members to be rescued were in fact their younger siblings. Someone towards whom the player character would naturally have a more protective relationship. And that would especially be true if any other person who can, take on that protective role when compared to the, with regards to the other family members, were to, were to be eliminated. Yeah, I'm going dark. I'm going a little bit dark with this new story, but it does service the game later on. You'll see how. The second addition I would want to make is actually one by subtraction, in that instead of the family members being scattered at various locations all throughout the Caribbean, locations that you then have to scoop out with a large degree, with a significant number of chases and fights. Instead, I want these. Instead, I want all the family members to be in one singular location, namely the main villain's hideout, where the final battle of the game would also take place. So the final fight of the whole game would be would also be its resolution, rather than whenever the player decides to call it quits. The third improvement stems less from the premise itself, but more from how it is actualized within the story. And by that I mean that the main villain, his main acolyte, and another minor villain are all from the same faction, which places a lot of strain on the faction system within the game, especially at higher difficulties. My solution to that is to instead have the main villain and any acolytes he would use throughout the story all be part of their own separate faction. One that would operate as a secret society. One whose aim is to establish dominion over the Caribbean, separate from all of the European settler nations, which would be the main factions of the game. The players will have the option to either join the pirates, in which case they would be hunted by basically every other faction, but they would have a lot of freedom when it comes to their when it comes to their potential targets, or they could choose to become a member of one of their faction, of one of the settler nations, the French, the English, the Dutch, and the Spanish, and become a privateer for for that nation and that nation alone, which would limit the number of missions and possibilities that the player has, but it would on a counterpoint make it more easy for the player to gain certain accomplishments. Also, playing for one of these main nations would allow the player to join the main villain's secret society, and either join it outright, or take it over from within, or completely wreck it. Those are all things that could happen. Regardless of which faction the player chooses, there need to be two things that get accomplished. The first of these is that each faction needs to be its own, independent, fully realized campaign. And by that I mean that it has to have its own progression markers, its own rivalries, and its own love interests, etc., etc. An important thing to note here is that a character who can be the player's mentor in one run with one particular faction could become the player's most heated rival in another run with another faction. It is that level of interconnectivity and moral relativity that I really want to play around with throughout this game. It is also the main reason why I don't want the player to be able to choose to join the main villain secret society from after having joined the pirates, because if you look at it from the avenue of political history, the pirates of the within the Caribbean, at least, and especially within that time frame, have placed a very interesting social organization, have instituted a very specific, very interesting level of social organization. One that in many ways would go on to become what is now known as political anarchy. And by contrast, I think the secret society of the villain would perhaps match the ideology of the United States founding fathers a little bit more. And being able to compare and contrast those, especially contrast, would be more effective if I keep them as wholly separate institutions. It is still, nevertheless, a level of interconnectivity and moral relativity that I find would be worth exploring. That level of exploration could also be enhanced, for example, by adding two more factions, the natives and the missionaries, which would allow for new possibilities for alliances, and also new favors and new allies within the game. And another thing that could enhance that is to add a little bit more granularity within each location. So instead of a French port only having French denizens, that French port could perhaps have an English neighborhood, a Dutch neighborhood, a Spanish neighborhood, or even a native neighborhood. Like, explore locations as their own distinctive location, as their own distinctive pocket world with its own distinctive set of characteristics. That is something that I think would be worth exploring, even if over and over again. So yeah, that's the first thing each run with a faction should allow. The second thing each run with any faction should allow is for the player to be able to actually accomplish the main quest line of the game, which is finding and avenging their family. Whether or not the player chooses to actually go through with that is another matter entirely. But I want this to be to be a possibility. I also want to see this game implement multiple endings, and by multiple endings I mean not just summaries of how they played and then basically some kind of rating, but I mean like actually something more something more advanced, something a little bit more intricate, like with cutscenes and character arc resolutions and all of that stuff. A more complex where are they now instead of where are you now. Admittedly, that is a little bit more complex, and it goes beyond the scope of this video. So I won't go into it now. I might go into it in the future, unless if I'm being paid for it, but not now. Anyway, that was my video. Thank you for your attention. If you enjoyed it, well then please like this video. Maybe even share it wherever you think other people will like it as well. If there is anything you'd like to add, either to the game I've based these remake suggestions on, or on the suggestions themselves, well, that's what the comment section is for. And if you want to see when my next video gets released, well then please subscribe. And ideally also ring the bell or do whatever else YouTube will ask of you in order to keep you notified. I also have a main channel where I talk about book-related and literature topics, a link to which you can find in the description down below, right past my social media links, which I also suggest you check out should you choose to. Alternatively, or additionally, you can also support me on Patreon, where you will receive various perks such as early access to videos and scripts, both for this channel and the aforementioned main one. I'm once again reminding you to subscribe and get yourself notified, because I genuinely can't remember if I said this already in the video. And until next time, I have been the One Take Man.